You have probably asked yourself this exact painful question 100 times. You look at your relationship history or your closest friendships, and a terrifying pattern emerges. You are a deeply empathetic, kind, and forgiving person who constantly tries to see the best in others. Yet, you repeatedly find yourself completely entangled with people who lie to you, manipulate you, and drain your energy. You give them endless chances. You apologize for their bad behavior, and you try to love them into becoming better people. And in return, they twist your words, cross every boundary you set, and somehow convince you that everything is entirely your fault. Society has a very frustrating, deeply victim-blaming diagnosis for this specific dynamic. They tell you that you are just being weak, codependent, or entirely desperate for affection. They say that you just need to raise your standards and simply walk away the moment things get difficult. And after hearing that simplistic advice enough times, you slowly begin to internalize that toxic shame. You look at your deep capacity to love difficult people, and you hate yourself for being so unbelievably blind. You wonder why your internal radar seems completely broken, repeatedly driving you straight into the arms of a disaster. But today I want to offer you a completely different, heavily researched psychological diagnosis. Your radar is not broken, you are not weak, and your capacity to forgive is not a fundamental flaw. You are trapped in a documented clinical phenomenon, a highly magnetic polarity between two specific brain types. To understand why you keep ending up in this invisible cage, we have to look closely at your psychological hardware. Think of human personality exactly like a spectrum of agreeableness and emotional availability. A neurotypical brain operates somewhere in the safe, highly functional middle of that exact spectrum. They have enough empathy to connect with others, but enough ego to fiercely protect their own self-interest. But your brain processes human connection at a much higher, far more intense resolution. You belong to a category of people that psychology refers to as highly agreeable, or occasionally egoists. For you, feeling another person's pain is not just a polite, abstract intellectual exercise. Your hyperactive mirror neurons are instantly downloading and physically simulating the suffering of everyone around you. If someone you love is hurting, your nervous system immediately absorbs that heavy, frantic energy as your own. And most importantly, you possess a massive, almost completely unfiltered conscience. When a conflict arises, your automatic biological default is to instantly look inward and ask what you did wrong. You are fundamentally wired to compromise, to de-escalate, and to prioritize the harmony of the tribe over your own ego. This is an incredible, beautiful superpower that makes you a deeply safe, highly nurturing place for other human beings. But biologically speaking, it also makes you the absolute perfect, highest yielding supply for a predator. We have to look at the exact opposite end of that personality spectrum to understand the trap. Individuals who score high on the dark tetrad traits, such as narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy, operate completely differently. They do not possess the biological hardware required to feel genuine effective empathy or internal guilt. For them, every single human interaction is not a search for connection. It is a rigid, calculated game for control. They are driven by an endless, highly desperate need for external validation, power, and emotional supply. When a manipulative personality walks into a crowded room, their radar is actively scanning for a very specific target. They do not target neurotypical people who possess strong egos and firm, unyielding boundaries. Those people are far too difficult to control and require a massive, exhausting amount of energy to dismantle. Instead, they scan the room specifically looking for your exact, high-resolution emotional signature. They look for the person who is quick to smile, quick to apologize, and incredibly eager to understand. They are biologically drawn to your high agreeableness because it represents an infinite, completely undefended resource. The tragic reality is that toxic people are not drawn to you because you are weak or broken. They are drawn to you specifically because you possess the deep, profound light that they entirely lack. You do not attract narcissists because you are secretly flawed. You attract them because you are highly valuable real estate. But the trap actually goes much deeper and gets much darker than simple initial attraction. There is a powerful chemical component to your entanglement that you simply cannot ignore or willpower away. Once the toxic person identifies you, they deploy a psychological weapon called intermittent reinforcement. In the beginning, they completely mirror your deepest desires, flooding you with intense affection, praise, and perfect understanding. This phase is called love bombing, and it triggers a massive, unnatural release of dopamine in your brain. You feel seen, deeply understood, and completely safe for the first time in your entire life. But the exact moment your nervous system becomes dependent on that chemical high, the illusion violently shatters. They suddenly withdraw their affection, become cold, highly critical, and entirely unpredictable. In quantum physics, this is known as a phase transition. The warm, solid ground suddenly becomes a terrifying void. And for your specific empathetic brain, that sudden coldness feels like a literal physical threat to your survival. Your amygdala instantly lights up, flooding your body with cortisol and a desperate, frantic need to fix the connection. So you double down on your empathy, apologizing for things you didn't even do, just to win back the warm version of them. And occasionally, completely randomly, they will give you a tiny, fleeting breadcrumb of that original love. That tiny breadcrumb creates a massive dopamine spike, completely cementing the addiction deep into your neural pathways. You are not staying in the relationship because you are weak, codependent, or stupid. You are staying because your nervous system is trapped in a brutal, highly addictive trauma bond. Your brain effectively asks a very logical, strictly biological question under these exact conditions. Why would we leave the only known source of the cure, even if that source is also the poison? You are essentially running your high-performance empathetic engine on incredibly toxic fuel, wondering why it is breaking. But you already know the ultimate devastating cost of this dangerous repeating cycle. Endless empathy is an incredibly beautiful gift, but without boundaries, it is a terrible place to die. It keeps the predator perfectly comfortable, but it keeps your soul entirely starved, exhausted, and bleeding out. So how do we actually break this magnetic cycle and force the brain to stop engaging? How do we get your high-resolution mind to finally see the machine hiding behind the mask? We cannot rely on trying to communicate your pain more clearly, because communication requires two healthy nervous systems. Instead, we have to change the rules of the game using a concept called cognitive firewalling. Right now, your brain's automatic reflex is to project your own beautiful conscience onto the toxic person. You assume that deep down, they must feel the exact same guilt, remorse, and love that you feel. We need to deliberately shatter that illusion to bypass your empathy response entirely. Before you engage with this person again today, you are going to write a strict, factual contract with yourself. You will physically write down the exact objective facts of their behavior, completely stripping away the emotional context. You write, "They lied, they yelled, they blamed me, and they refused to take accountability." This sounds incredibly harsh, but neurologically, it functions as a master key for the empathetic brain. By focusing purely on the data, you completely neutralize your own biological urge to justify their actions. The amygdala goes to sleep because you are no longer trying to solve an unsolvable emotional puzzle. Your brain stops seeing the toxic person as a wounded bird that desperately needs your healing. Second, you must consciously learn to separate your inherent worth from their absolute inability to love you. The empathetic mind constantly believes that if you just try a little bit harder, you can finally fix them. But people with high dark tetrad traits are completely closed, highly rigid biological systems. You are trying to pour your infinite, beautiful water into a cup that has absolutely no bottom. When you are in the presence of this person, your deep empathy is simply not allowed to drive the car. You just observe their behavior clinically, no matter how much they try to trigger your guilt or your anger. You can invite your empathy back tomorrow when you are safely around healthy people, but today you just observe. I know how deeply frustrating it is to feel trapped inside a cycle of endless giving and constant betrayal. To know exactly how much love you have to offer the world, but to see it entirely weaponized against you. But you must remember that your magnetic attraction to toxic people is not a moral failing or a sign of weakness. It is just a miscalibrated protection mechanism perfectly designed to keep the tribe connected and safe. You have been carrying the heavy, exhausting burden of trying to heal the unhealable for a very long time. It is time to completely put down the tools and step away from the broken machine. It is time to trade the illusion of fixing them for the beautiful, messy reality of protecting yourself. Start incredibly small today, build your cognitive firewall, and I will see you in the next one.